Hey everybody, Fran here at New Testament Explained. This video marks the first video of 9 videos that look at the Bible passages that make up Anthology 6 on the Edexcel A-Level Religious Studies course for New Testament Studies. So there are quite a lot of Bible passages for this anthology section. However, I'm going to break it down into 9 separate videos, so it's not too much. Now, in terms of Anthology 6, it is part of topic 5.2, which is why did Jesus have to die? But the first few videos we're going to look at actually are going to be focusing more on why does Jesus come into conflict. And as the white box here demonstrates, what we are looking at is 2 areas primarily. First of all, in each Bible passage, we are asking ourselves, what is causing the disagreement? What is Jesus saying or doing that is leading to conflict? And the chances are it will just be one of these 3 options. It is that he sort of breaks the law of Moses or challenges the law of Moses, perhaps. The second might be that he is causing controversy surrounding the Sabbath, generally by breaking the Sabbath. And the final one is challenging the authority of the temple in Jerusalem, also known as temple cleansing, the idea that you are trying to remove the corruption and to cleanse the temple of its somewhat impurities in terms of how people are acting or behaving inside of it. So for each passage we're going to read and decide which of those 3 categories does the passage fit into. But we are also going to look at key themes that appear in these passages, more broadly speaking. So the first one is Christology, and that is where Jesus is making statements about his relationship with God. They will be fairly easy to identify. The second theme that may come out is blasphemy, the idea of not treating God with respect or insulting God. And what we'll realise here is that it sort of depends. Jewish perceptions of what blasphemy is slightly different to Jesus' perception of what blasphemy is. So that will appear at various points. Another theme is just any threat to power, and this could be the power of a religious authority or the power of a Roman authority. So what we need to pinpoint is there a group and a group of authority whose power is being threatened by Jesus in what he is saying or in how he is acting. And then the final theme is political expedience. And this is the idea that a authority, whether that be religious authority or political authority, has to act quite harshly, perhaps overly harshly, in order to maintain law and order. So it's the idea that an authority, whether it be religious or political, are acting quite almost hastily and a bit, it would seem to us, quite harshly, but it's for a reason of trying to maintain law and order. So I'm going to look at Jesus clears the temple court in this video. We're going to look at what the disagreement's about. We're going to look at key themes that appear. And the way I'm going to do this is put the passage up and talk about it and kind of narrate through the passage rather than separating these 2 topics out. Just before we start, I'm going to give, as I always do with these videos, a bit of an overview of this passage and where it fits in John's Gospel, more broadly speaking. So the event we're looking at, Jesus clears the temple court, is recorded in all of the Gospels in the New Testament. However, John's Gospel places this passage at the start of Jesus' campaign against the Jewish establishment. By comparison, the Synoptic Gospels position this passage at the end of their Gospel, so we've got a difference here. The version we're going to read today is more towards the beginning of John's Gospel, whereas if you read Matthew, Mark and Luke, this passage will be much later in their Gospels. Now, a scholar named Culpeper has said that the reason for this difference, the reason John has placed this earlier in his Gospel, it's for a thematic reason, And we get the quote, "Jerusalem is established as the locus of Jesus' sharpest conflicts with unbelief, which has been hardened by misunderstanding of the scriptures, institutions, and festivals of Judaism." And what Culpepper's trying to say there is the reason John places it earlier is that he's trying to establish Jerusalem as a place where Jesus comes into quite sharp conflicts, quite serious conflicts. And that is why it's early. He's trying to establish that earlier on in his gospel. Right then, this is the first section of the passage, and it starts with the phrase, the sentence, when it was almost time for the Jewish Passover, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now, Passover was one of the 3 festivals whereby Jewish Israelites were expected to take a pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem. And what this means is that when this event happens, when Jesus clears the temple court, the temple itself and Jerusalem, more broadly speaking, would have been crammed with pilgrims who have gone to the temple as part of this pilgrimage for the festival of Passover. And as we look through the rest of this narrative and how people react, and looking at what Jesus does, we get the key theme of political expedience emerge, because what we can understand from the timing of this event, i.e. it being at Jewish Passover, is that the authorities will not have been willing to let this slide. What Jesus does had the potential to incite others into being violent, even if it was just because other people didn't like the Romans. It didn't have to be about the temple, as we'll see later on. So this fits into political expediency because the timing means that authorities just have to act, because the potential consequence of what Jesus does could have been more people acting in a similar way, which in a nutshell could have led to a riot. Straight into the next sentence then. In the temple courts, Jesus finds people selling cattle, sheep, and doves. This was for animal sacrifice. This is why the selling and exchanges are taking place. And Jesus has a problem with this, as we'll note shortly. And the reason for his anger towards this practice is that you've got Bible passages such as Psalms 51:16 that says you don't need animal sacrifice to worship God, and Jesus more generally believed that you didn't need animal sacrifice to worship God and to believe in God. So he has a problem with that. We then get that others are sitting at tables exchanging money. Now, they will have been exchanging Roman coins with the emperor's face on for silver shekels, which are coins you can spend in the temple. And again, it's this idea that the temple's not being used as Jesus thinks it should be. There is corruption. It's all about economic exchange, selling animals, sacrifice, which is not where he thinks the emphasis should be. So he reacts. He makes a whip out of cords and drove all from the temple courts, sheep, cattle, scattered the coins, overturned the tables. This is the only instance we get really where Jesus is violent and quite physical in his reaction. In terms of key themes that emerge, so we've said we've got political expedience, we've now got blasphemy as what religious authorities in particular would have considered this being, is an attack on a holy place and a prevention of Jewish people worshipping God. So there's kind of 2 offences, attacking a holy place and stopping people worshipping God. And they would have seen that as blasphemy because it is disrespecting God. It is preventing people from worshipping God whilst also attacking a holy place, which is also a disrespect towards God. So his actions would have been considered blasphemous by religious authorities in particular. We get quite a famous quote at this point. Jesus says, "Stop turning my Father's house into a market." He feels that people in the temple are being exploited by the authorities, that they shouldn't need to be coming to the temple to spend money and exchange money, and that's not where the emphasis should be. And contextually, just speaking more historically, authorities could make quite a lot of money out of this period in the calendar, in terms of having so many pilgrims in Jerusalem at this point for Passover. The fact he says "my Father" is a sentence that fits in with Christology, the idea that Jesus is making known to other people that he is essentially God's son. So that relationship is made explicit, so it fits in with the theme of Christology. But in terms of what we should maybe have at this point as well is, more broadly speaking, we can see that the topic of disagreement is temple cleansing. The problem Jesus has in this instance is that he is angered by the corruption in the temple, and he wants to cleanse the temple of such corruption. So in terms of the topic of disagreement, we have temple cleansing. In terms of key themes, we've got political expediency is evident in this passage, Christology is evident in this passage, as is threat. Blasphemy. Blasphemy is also evident in this passage. This then is the final section of Jesus clears the temple court, and it starts with the authorities saying to Jesus, "What sign can you show us to prove your authority?" So this is Jesus, the authorities saying to Jesus, "So prove yourself. What sign can you show us? What can you do to prove the authority you're claiming to have?" Again, it's this maybe slight perception coming through now that the authorities feel threatened. They want him to prove himself against them and their authority. Jesus responds by saying, "Destroy this temple and I will raise it again in 3 days." With hindsight, it is symbolic towards the crucifixion. However, at the time, this is seen again as blasphemous, as blasphemy, because he is claiming to be better than the temple. The idea that he can destroy it is issue number one, and the idea that he can build it in 3 days. So what we're getting again across this second half of the passage is blasphemy. We're also getting the idea that the power of religious authorities in the temple is being threatened. And then finally, the response to Jesus' claim that he will destroy the temple and raise it in 3 days is the religious authorities saying it has taken 46 years to build this temple, and you are going to raise it in 3 days. Again, it shows you that when Jesus is talking, all they are seeing is a threat to their power. They're only seeing blasphemy. They're not understanding the message Jesus is trying to get across. Now, in the Old Testament, there are 2 references to the Messiah rebuilding the temple. It's Malachi chapter 3 verse 1 and the Zechariah chapter 14 verse 21. So there is evidence in the Old Testament that the Messiah will sort of act in this way. But again, they're not seeing that. They've kind of got sort of almost narrow-minded, kind of closed views, in that they just, whatever Jesus is saying, they are just seeing as a threat to their power and as blasphemy, and nothing really more than that. That then marks the end of the first Bible passage that makes up Anthology 6. So we've got the topic of disagreement being temple cleansing, and then all 4 themes emerging across this passage. Make sure you subscribe if you're not already, and stay tuned for the remaining 8 videos on Anthology 6.